Commander Vex Ironscale stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the green and brown planet grow larger on the main screen. His metal skin gleamed under the ship's lights as he studied the readings. This world would be perfect for his people. The air was poison to most species. The ground was frozen solid in some places and burning hot in others, and the gravity would crush any weak creature that tried to walk on its surface. The Krathri had ruled the galaxy's worst worlds for 3,000 years. While other species built fancy ships and lived on easy planets with soft air and gentle gravity, the Krathri made their homes where nothing else could survive. Their bodies were made for it. 9 feet tall, covered in natural metal armor, with backup hearts and lungs in case the first ones failed. They could walk in space without suits, breathe poison gas, and laugh at temperatures that would boil or freeze other beings. Vex had been born on a world where the rain was acid and the wind could strip flesh from bone. His father had conquered a planet where the very rocks tried to kill you. His grandfather had tamed a moon where the air itself was on fire. This new world, designated Kepler 442c by the Galactic Survey teams, would be another jewel in the Krathiri crown. "Sir, we're getting strange readings," reported Science Officer Kel Stormridge from his station. His voice carried the deep rumble that all Krathri possessed, like rocks grinding together in an avalanche. Vex turned his massive head toward his officer. "What kind of strange?" "Energy signatures, sir. Organized patterns. It looks like someone is already living down there." This was unexpected but not impossible. Sometimes they found primitive species scratching out miserable lives on death worlds. The Krathori would study them, learn from their adaptations, then relocate them to more suitable worlds before claiming the planet. It was the civilized way to do things. "Put it on screen," Vex ordered. The image changed to show the planet's surface in detail. What Vex saw made his armored jaw drop open. The surface was covered with buildings. Not crude shelters or simple huts, but actual cities with gleaming towers and complex structures. Roads connected different settlements, and he could see vehicles moving along them. "Run a biological scan," Vex commanded. "What species are we dealing with?" Kel worked at his controls for several minutes, his metal fingers clicking against the buttons. Finally, he looked up with confusion written across his scarred features. "Sir, the readings don't make sense. The dominant life forms appear to be small, soft-bodied creatures. No natural armor, no redundant organs, no visible adaptations for this environment. According to our databases, they should have died within minutes of exposure to this world's conditions." Vex moved to look at the scanner data himself. The readings showed creatures that were barely 5.5 feet tall on average, with thin skin, fragile bones, and organs that would fail instantly in this planet's harsh environment. Yet somehow, millions of them were not just alive, but apparently thriving. "Could our equipment be malfunctioning?" Vex asked. "I've run diagnostics 3 times, sir. Everything is working perfectly. These creatures really are living on this death world with no apparent protection." Vex made a decision that would change everything he thought he knew about survival. "Take us down. We need to see this for ourselves." The Krathori landing ship descended through the toxic atmosphere like a falling mountain. The hull, designed to withstand the pressures of gas giant storms and the heat of stellar coronas, barely registered the planet's hostile environment. As they approached the largest settlement, Vex could see the impossible creatures moving around outside their buildings, wearing nothing but thin fabric coverings. The ship touched down on a flat area outside the city. Through the viewports, Vex could see a group of the aliens approaching. They moved with purpose and confidence, not the desperate scrambling of creatures fighting for survival in a hostile environment. "Sir, they're requesting communication," reported Communications Officer Zach Ironheart. "Put them through." A voice came through the speakers, speaking perfect galactic standard. "Unknown vessel. This is Colonial Defense Force. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. Vex stepped forward. This is Commander Vex Ironscale of the 47th Crotheri Expedition. Fleet, we claim this world for the Crotheri Empire under galactic colonization protocols. There was a pause, then what sounded like laughter came through the speakers. I'm afraid that's not going to work, Commander. This world is already inhabited and claimed. Would you like to meet face to face? We're curious about your species. Vex looked at his officers. In 3 millennia of expansion, no one had ever laughed at a Crothari claim. Very well, we will meet at the bottom of our ship. The cargo bay doors opened, and Vex led a team of 6 Crotheri outside. The planet's atmosphere immediately tried to kill them, but their armor systems and natural resistance handled it easily. The gravity was strong enough to make movement slightly more difficult, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. But these were minor inconveniences to beings built for far worse conditions. What waited for them was impossible. A group of 12 creatures stood calmly in the open air. They wore simple clothing and basic breathing masks, but large portions of their skin were exposed to the toxic atmosphere. Their leader stepped forward and removed her breathing mask completely, revealing a young face with bright eyes and an expression of friendly curiosity. "Welcome to New Montana," she said, her voice clear and strong despite breathing the poisonous air directly. "I'm Captain Lisa Kane, Colonial Defense Force. We've been expecting visitors eventually." Vex stared at her in shock. The creature was tiny by his standards, barely reaching his chest even when he bent down. Her skin looked so thin he could see blood vessels underneath. She had no visible armor, no redundant organs, no adaptations at all for this environment. Yet she stood there breathing poison gas and smiling as if she were in a pleasant garden. "You should be dead," Vex said, unable to hide his amazement. Lisa Kane's smile grew wider, and for a moment, Vex caught something in her expression that reminded him of the look a predator gets just before it strikes. "Yeah, we get that a lot. Would you like a tour? I think you'll find our little colony interesting." Behind her, the other humans began removing their breathing masks as well. Children ran up from the city, laughing and playing games in air that would dissolve Crotheri lung tissue in minutes. Workers carried heavy equipment across ground that fluctuated between freezing and scalding temperatures. All of them moved like they were in their natural element. Vex looked at his science officer, who was frantically taking readings with every sensor they had. Kel met his commander's gaze and shook his massive head in disbelief. "This is impossible," Kel whispered in the Crotheri language. Lisa Kane tilted her head, apparently understanding their words despite speaking a completely different language moments before. "Impossible is just another word for something we haven't figured out how to do yet. Come on, let me show you around. I think you're going to learn a lot about what survival really means." As they walked toward the city, Vex noticed more impossible things. The buildings were constructed to take advantage of the planet's harsh conditions rather than simply resist them. Geothermal vents were incorporated into the design to provide power. The toxic atmosphere was being processed and used as raw materials for manufacturing. Even the extreme temperature swings were being harvested for energy. These creatures weren't just surviving on this death world. They were using its hostility as a resource. Vex began to suspect that everything the Crotheri thought they knew about survival was about to be proven wrong. Lisa Kane led the group of Crotheri through the main street of Haven Ridge. Vex kept looking around in shock at what he saw. Human children were playing games outside in temperatures that would freeze his people's blood solid. The little ones ran and laughed, their breath making small clouds in the cold air, but they seemed perfectly happy. "How many people live here?" Vex asked as they walked past a school where young humans were learning outside under the open sky. "About 50,000 in this settlement," Lisa replied. "We have 12 cities like this one scattered across the continent. More are being built every month." Kel was taking readings with his scanner as they walked. He kept shaking his head and checking his equipment. "Commander, these readings are impossible. The atmospheric toxicity alone should kill them in minutes." A group of human workers walked past them, carrying heavy metal beams toward a construction site. They wore light clothing and simple breathing masks, but their arms and faces were completely exposed to the poisonous air. One of them, a big man with gray hair, noticed the aliens and waved cheerfully. "Morning, Captain Kane," he called out. "These our new visitors?" "That's right, George. This is Commander Vex and his people. They're from the Cruthery Empire." George set down his load and walked over. He pulled off his breathing mask and smiled at the towering aliens. "Welcome to New Montana. First time seeing a Deathworld colony." Vex stared at the human. George looked old by any standard, with lines on his face and silver in his hair. His hands were scarred from years of hard work. By all logic, he should have been the most vulnerable member of his species, yet he stood in the toxic air breathing. "Normally, you should not be able to survive here," Vex said. George laughed. "Yeah, that's what the survey teams told us when we first arrived. Said this place would kill us inside a week. That was 15 years ago. How?" Kel asked, his scientific mind desperate for answers. "Practice," George said simply. "First few months were rough, I'll give you that. Lost some good people while we figured things out. But humans are stubborn. We don't give up easy." Lisa Kane started walking again, leading them toward a large industrial building. "George is being modest. He's our head of construction. He's built half the city with his own hands." As they approached the building, Vex could see it was some kind of processing plant. Steam and vapor poured from vents in the roof, and the air around it shimmered with heat. Warning signs in multiple languages covered the entrance, but human workers walked in and out without protective suits. "This is our geothermal processing facility," Lisa explained as they entered through the main doors. "We tap into the planet's volcanic activity to generate power and extract materials." The inside of the building was even more impossible than the outside. The temperature was so high that Vex's armor began registering warnings. Toxic gases filled the air in concentrations that would dissolve most living tissue. Yet human workers moved through the facility like they were walking through a comfortable office. "The core chamber reaches temperatures of over 400 degrees, Lisa said, pointing to a sealed room where figures in minimal protective gear worked around glowing machinery. The atmospheric mix in there would kill most galactic species instantly. Vex watched as a young human woman opened the sealed door and walked into the chamber. She wore a simple breathing mask and light protective clothing, but most of her skin was exposed to conditions that would challenge Cruthery engineering equipment. "That's impossible," Kel whispered. "That's Amy Johnson," Lisa corrected. "She's been working these conditions for 8 years. Her body has adapted to handle the heat and toxins better than any protective suit we could build." They watched Amy work for several minutes. She moved with practiced ease, checking gauges and adjusting controls while standing in an environment that should have killed her instantly. When she finished, she walked back out and removed her breathing mask. "Everything looks good, Captain," Amy reported. "The new extraction system is running at full capacity." Vex studied the young woman carefully. Her skin had a different texture than the other humans he had seen, slightly thicker and with a faint metallic sheen. Her breathing was deeper and slower than normal. Her eyes had adapted to see clearly in the superheated environment. "You are not the same as the others," Vex observed. Amy smiled. "None of us are exactly the same anymore. The planet changes you if you let it. Some of us change more than others." "This is impossible," Kel said again. "Biological adaptation takes thousands of years." "For most species," Lisa agreed. "Humans are different. We adapt fast when we need to." They left the processing plant and continued through the city. Everywhere Vex looked, he saw more impossible things. Children who had been born on the planet showed physical differences from their parents. Their lung capacity was larger, their skin was thicker, and they moved with an efficiency that spoke of bodies perfectly adapted to their environment. In the medical center, they met Dr. Helen Wright, a middle-aged woman who had been working around the clock treating patients. She showed them through the facility, explaining how human medicine had evolved to deal with the planet's unique challenges. "We see injuries and conditions here that don't exist anywhere else," Dr. Wright explained, as she checked on a patient who had been exposed to a concentrated burst of toxic gas. "This man should be dead. Instead, his lungs have developed new structures to process the toxins and convert them into useful compounds." The patient sat up in bed and waved at the visitors. "Don't mind me," he said cheerfully. "Doc says I'll be back to work tomorrow." "Work where?" Vex asked. "Deep mining. I'm part of the crew that works the volcanic vents 2 miles underground. Best job I ever had." Vex looked at Dr. Wright. "He works underground in volcanic conditions?" "Oh yes. We have several teams working at depths and temperatures that would challenge your best equipment. The human body is remarkably adaptable when it needs to be." That evening, Lisa Kane invited the Crethri to dinner at her home. The building was constructed to take advantage of the planet's natural energy sources, with geothermal heating and atmospheric processors built into the walls. The dinner was cooked using volcanic heat channeled through the building's foundation. "You have been here how long?" Vex asked as they ate food that had been grown in toxic soil and prepared in superheated ovens. "I've been here 12 years. Lisa replied. "I was part of the original survey team that was supposed to determine if the planet could be colonized." "And your conclusion?" Lisa smiled. "That it was perfect for human settlement. Not because it was safe, but because it was dangerous. Humans don't want safe worlds, Commander. We want worlds that challenge us, that force us to become better than we were." "But the cost," Kel protested. "You said you lost people in the early days." "We did. Good people who took risks to build something better for their children. But their sacrifice wasn't meaningless. Every person who died taught us something about how to survive here. Every challenge we faced made us stronger." After dinner, they stood on Lisa's balcony looking out over the city. The night sky was filled with toxic clouds that glowed with their own chemical light. In the distance, volcanic peaks erupted regularly, sending streams of lava across the landscape. It was a vision of hell by most galactic standards. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Lisa said, breathing the poisonous air deeply. "You find this beautiful?" Vex asked. "I find it honest. This world doesn't pretend to be something it's not. It's harsh and dangerous, and it will kill you if you're not careful. But if you can learn to work with it instead of against it, it will give you everything you need to build something amazing." As they watched, a group of human children ran through the streets below, playing a game that involved dodging between the toxic gas vents. They laughed and shouted, treating the deadly environment as their playground. "Your species is insane," Vex said quietly. "Probably," Lisa agreed. "But that's why we're still here when smarter species have given up and gone extinct. We're too crazy to know when we're supposed to quit." The ground began shaking at dawn on the 4th day of the Cretheri visit. Vex was awakened in his quarters aboard the ship by alarms screaming through the corridors. He rushed to the bridge where his officers were staring at their screens in shock. "Report," Vex commanded as he took his position. "Sir, massive seismic activity across the entire continent," reported Navigation Officer Tor Steelclaw. "The volcanic systems are going crazy. We're reading eruptions starting everywhere." Vex looked at the main screen. Across the planet's surface, red dots were appearing as volcanoes that had been dormant for centuries suddenly came to life. Huge clouds of toxic gas were pouring into the atmosphere, and the temperature readings were climbing rapidly. "How bad?" Is it? Vex asked. Kel worked frantically at his science station. Sir, this is beyond anything we've seen. The atmospheric toxicity is increasing by the hour. Surface temperatures are rising past safe levels even for us. This planet is becoming uninhabitable. The communication system crackled to life. Krathery vessel, this is Captain Kane. We're reading your position and wanted to make sure you're safe up there. Vex activated the reply channel. Captain Kane, you need to evacuate immediately. Our ships can carry your entire population to safety. This world is about to become a death trap. There was a pause, then Kane's voice came back with what sounded like amusement. Thanks for the offer, Commander, but we're not going anywhere. You don't understand, Vex said, his voice rising. The toxic gas concentrations will triple within hours. The surface temperature will exceed biological tolerance for any known species within days. Even my people cannot survive what this planet is becoming. Yeah, we're getting the same readings down here. It's going to be a rough couple of weeks. Vex stared at the communication panel. These creatures were facing certain death, and they sounded calm about it. Captain Kane, I don't think you understand the severity of the situation. This is not a temporary emergency. Your world is undergoing a permanent change that will make it impossible for life to exist. Commander, I appreciate your concern, but we've been through worse. Worse? What could possibly be worse than this? Earth, Kane replied simply. Ice ages that lasted for thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for decades. Asteroid impacts that wiped out 90% of all life. Plague outbreaks that killed 9 out of every 10 humans alive. We survived all of it. Through the ship's viewports, Vex could see the human settlements below. Instead of panic and evacuation, he saw organized activity. Construction crews were working faster than ever, building new structures and modifying existing ones. Instead of fleeing from the disaster, the humans seemed to be preparing to fight it. Sir, I'm reading massive construction activity across all human settlements. Reported Tor. They're not evacuating. They're digging deeper into the planet. Vex made a decision that went against all military protocol. Prepare a shuttle. I'm going down there. Sir, the atmospheric conditions are becoming dangerous even for us, Kel warned. I have to see this for myself. The shuttle ride down through the increasingly toxic atmosphere was rough. The pilot had to dodge clouds of poisonous gas and navigate around electrical storms caused by the chemical reactions in the air. When they landed outside Haven Ridge, Vex could see the changes immediately. The air shimmered with heat and chemical vapors. The ground cracked and steamed as volcanic activity increased underground. The sky had turned an ugly orange color as toxic gases filled the atmosphere. It was a vision of a world dying, but the humans were not dying. Work crews moved through the settlement with purpose and efficiency. They were constructing new buildings designed to handle the worsening conditions. Underground tunnels connected the major structures, and new ventilation systems were being installed throughout the city. Lisa Kane met him at the landing site. She wore a more advanced breathing mask than before, but still had large areas of exposed skin. Her appearance had changed since his last visit. Her skin had a tougher texture, and her eyes had adapted to see clearly through the toxic haze. Welcome back, Commander, she said. Sorry about the mess. The planet's having one of its moods. Your people should be dead, Vex said, looking around at the workers who continued their tasks despite the increasingly hostile environment. Should be, yeah. But humans are stubborn that way. Come on, let me show you what we're doing. She led him through the settlement, pointing out the modifications being made to deal with the crisis. Buildings were being reinforced and sealed. New air processing systems were being installed. Most impressive of all, the humans were finding ways to use the increasing volcanic activity as a power source. We're actually getting more energy now than we were before, Kane explained as they watched a crew installing equipment near a new volcanic vent. All this geological activity is giving us access to power sources we never had before. Vex watched the workers in amazement. They were operating in conditions that would challenge his people's best environmental suits, yet they were only basic protective gear. One worker, a man named Pete Williams, was working directly next to a stream of volcanic gas that would dissolve Krathori armor. His breathing equipment failed an hour ago, Kane noted, following Vex's gaze. But Pete's been working the deep volcanic sites for years. His lungs have adapted to process these gases directly. That's impossible, Vex said, for what felt like the 100th time since meeting these creatures. Pete used to think so too. But when your choice is adapt or die, humans usually choose adapt. They visited the medical center where Dr. Wright was treating casualties from the ongoing disaster. But the injuries she was treating were not what Vex expected. Instead of people dying from toxic exposure, he saw workers who were being treated for rapid biological changes. We're seeing unprecedented adaptation rates, Dr. Wright explained as she examined a patient whose blood chemistry had changed to better handle the toxic atmosphere. The human body is responding to the crisis by accelerating beneficial mutations. How is this possible? Vex asked. Humans have always been evolutionary survivors, Wright replied. We're built to change quickly when we need to. Most species adapt over thousands of years. Humans can do it in months or even weeks when the pressure is high enough. The most shocking example was in the deep mining operations. Workers who had been trapped underground when the crisis began had not only survived, but were thriving in conditions that would challenge the most advanced technology. They had developed new physical capabilities that allowed them to work in environments no human had ever experienced before. Tony Rodriguez hasn't been to the surface in 6 weeks, Wright told them as they reviewed his medical files. His body has changed so much that normal atmosphere would now be toxic to him. He's trapped underground? Vex asked. He's evolved, Wright corrected. Tony is opening up mining operations in areas we never thought possible. His team is extracting resources from zones that were previously unreachable. That evening, Vex stood with Kane on the observation deck of the medical center, looking out over the transformed landscape. The sky was now a deep red color, filled with clouds of toxic gas. The ground glowed with heat from the volcanic activity below. It was a world that should have been empty of all life. Instead, he saw a human city that was busier than ever. Construction continued around the clock. New buildings rose from the toxic ground. Children played in areas that would kill most galactic species instantly. You're not just surviving this, Vex realized. You're using it to become stronger. Kane smiled, and in that expression, Vex saw something that made his armored skin crawl. It was the look of a predator that had found perfect hunting conditions. Commander, this crisis isn't destroying us, it's improving us. Every challenge this planet throws at us makes us better at being human. In a few months, when this settles down, we'll be stronger, smarter, and more capable than we were before. And then what? Vex asked. Then we'll be ready for the next challenge, and the one after that. Humans don't survive by avoiding problems, Commander. We survive by making problems make us better. As if to prove her point, a group of children ran past the building, laughing and playing games in air that would kill most adult members of other species. They had been born during the crisis, and their bodies showed adaptations that had never been seen in baseline human genetics. Vex realized. He was not witnessing a species facing extinction. He was watching the birth of something new and terrifying. The humans were not just surviving impossible conditions. They were using those conditions to transform themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. 3 weeks after the planetary crisis began, Vex made a decision that shocked his crew. He ordered his ship to remain in orbit while he continued studying the humans below. His officers thought he had lost his mind, but Vex knew he was witnessing something that would change everything the galaxy understood about life itself. The changes happening to the human population were beyond anything in galactic scientific records. What should have been an extinction event had become something else entirely. The humans were not just surviving the worsening conditions. They were becoming something new. In the medical center, Dr. Wright showed Vex records that defied every law of biology he knew. Children born during the crisis showed physical structures that had never existed in human anatomy before. Their lungs were larger and more complex, designed to process the toxic atmosphere with ease. Their bones were denser, their muscles more efficient, and their nervous systems worked differently than their parents. "This is baby Grace Miller," Dr. Wright said, showing him an infant who had been born just 2 weeks earlier. "Her parents are both deep miners who have worked in toxic conditions for years. Look at her lung structure." Vex studied the medical scans. The baby's respiratory system was completely unlike baseline human anatomy. Her lungs had developed new chambers and filtering systems that allowed her to breathe the contaminated air without any assistance. Her parents passed on genetic changes they acquired during their work, Wright explained. "We're seeing inheritance of acquired characteristics. That's supposed to be impossible." "Nothing about your species follows the rules," Vex replied. "That's because we don't wait for the rules to change. We change them ourselves." Wright took him to see other examples. A boy named Danny Chen, age 8, had been born before the crisis with normal human physiology. Now his body was rapidly adapting to the new conditions. His skin was developing a protective coating that filtered out toxins. His eyes were changing to see clearly through the chemical haze. His digestive system was learning to extract nutrition from sources that would poison other species. "How fast are these changes happening?" Vex asked. "Faster every day. Danny's body has changed more in the past 3 weeks than most species change in 3 generations. We're documenting new adaptations every few hours. The most extreme examples were found in the industrial zones where workers faced the worst conditions. Men and women who had been working in the toxic processing plants were developing completely new biological systems. Their blood had new proteins that neutralized poisons. Their nervous systems had rewired to function efficiently in low-oxygen environments. Some had grown additional organs to handle the extreme conditions. "Look at this," Wright said, showing him scans of a worker named Carl Thompson. Carl has been working in the geothermal plants since the crisis began. His body temperature regulation system has completely restructured itself. He can now function comfortably in temperatures that would cook most life forms. Vex watched Carl through the medical center windows as the man underwent his weekly checkup. Carl looked normal on the outside, but the scanner readings showed that his internal biology was barely recognizable as human anymore. "Is he still the same species?" Vex asked. "That's a good question. We're starting to think that human might be more of a process than a fixed biological state." The deep mining operations provided the most shocking examples of human adaptation. Workers who had been trapped in the underground facilities when the crisis began had not only survived, but had thrived in conditions that challenged the best technology available. Tony Rodriguez, who had been underground for over a month, was now leading teams in areas that had been considered completely impossible to explore. "Tony can't come to the surface anymore," Wright explained as they reviewed his latest medical data. "His body has adapted so completely to the deep environment that normal atmospheric conditions would be toxic to him now. So he's trapped? No. He's specialized. Tony is opening up resource extraction operations in areas we never dreamed of reaching. His team has found mineral deposits and energy sources that could power our colony for centuries." Vex studied the reports from the deep mining teams. They were working at depths where the pressure should crush any living being. The temperatures were hot enough to melt metal. The atmosphere was a mixture of toxic gases that would dissolve most materials on contact. Yet human teams were not just surviving these conditions, but establishing permanent operations there. "How many of these specialized workers do you have?" Vex asked. "About 300 so far, spread across different extreme environments. Each group is developing unique adaptations for their specific conditions. The deep miners are different from the volcanic workers, who are different from the atmospheric processors." What disturbed Vex most was that the humans seemed to be planning this transformation deliberately. Instead of trying to preserve their original biology, they were actively encouraging the changes. Parents were volunteering for extreme work assignments, knowing it would change them and affect their children. "You're weaponizing your own evolution," Vex said to Lisa Kane during one of their daily meetings. "We're optimizing it," Kane replied. "For millions of years, humans survived by adapting to whatever environment we found ourselves in. Now we're learning to control that process instead of leaving it to chance." Kane herself was a perfect example. Her appearance had continued changing throughout the crisis. Her skin had developed a metallic sheen that reflected harmful radiation. Her eyes had adapted to see clearly through the toxic atmosphere. Her breathing had become deeper and more efficient. She looked like the same person, but Vex's scanners showed that her biology was fundamentally different from the human who had first greeted him weeks ago. "What happens when this crisis ends?" Vex asked. "It won't end," Kane replied. "This is just the beginning. We've learned that we can direct our own evolutionary development. Why would we stop now?" She took him to see the newest construction projects, where specialized human workers were building structures that took advantage of abilities that baseline humans had never possessed. Teams with enhanced strength were constructing buildings from materials that would require heavy machinery. Workers with adapted vision were performing precision tasks in complete darkness. People with modified digestive systems were processing raw materials directly into useful compounds. "Each group develops the abilities they need for their work," Kane explained, "and they pass those abilities on to their children. In a few generations, we'll have human populations adapted for every environment imaginable." "You're creating different species," Vex realized. "We're creating better humans," Kane corrected. "Humans who can thrive anywhere, do anything, survive everything." That night, Vex stood in his quarters looking down at the planet through his viewport. The surface still glowed with volcanic activity and toxic clouds, but the human cities were larger and more active than ever. New settlements were being established in areas that had been uninhabitable even before the crisis. He activated his communication system and recorded a message for the Kratheri High Command. "This is Commander Vex Ironscale reporting on the situation. At Kepler 442c, the human population has not only survived the ongoing planetary crisis, but has used it to undergo rapid evolutionary advancement. They are developing specialized populations adapted for extreme environments and are establishing permanent operations in areas previously considered impossible for biological life." He paused, trying to find words for what he was witnessing. The humans are not adapting to survive in harsh environments. They are transforming harsh environments into advantages. They are turning every challenge into an opportunity to become more capable. "I believe we are witnessing the emergence of something that has never existed in galactic history. A species that doesn't just survive in extreme conditions, but actively seeks them out for the purpose of self-improvement. The implications of this development are beyond our current understanding." As he finished his report, Vex watched a group of human children playing in the toxic storms outside. They had been born during the crisis and showed adaptations that made them perfectly suited for conditions that would kill adults of most other species. They were laughing and running through poisonous clouds like they were playing in a gentle rain. The future of the galaxy had just changed, and the humans didn't even seem to realize how terrifying they had become. 6 months after first contact, Vex prepared his final report for the Cruthery High Command. The planet designated Kepler 442c would not be suitable for colonization. Not because it was uninhabitable, but because it was already inhabited by something far more dangerous than any environmental hazard the galaxy had ever known. The humans had not only survived the planetary catastrophe that should have wiped out all life, they had used it as an opportunity to transform themselves into something the galaxy had never seen before. The settlement of Haven Ridge had grown to over 100,000 people, with new arrivals coming from other human colonies specifically, seeking the extreme conditions that Kepler 442c provided. "Commander, we're receiving another transport from Earth," reported Communications Officer Zach Ironheart. "That's the 15th ship this month." Vex watched through the bridge viewports as another human vessel descended through the toxic atmosphere. The ships were specially designed to handle the planet's hostile conditions, but what amazed him was that many of the passengers would disembark wearing nothing but basic protective gear. "They're coming here on purpose," Vex said to himself. "Sir?" Zach asked. "They're not refugees fleeing safer worlds. They're volunteers seeking out the most dangerous environment they can find." The truth had become clear over the months of observation. Word had spread through human space about the adaptations happening on Kepler 442c. Instead of being horrified by the extreme conditions, humans from across the galaxy were competing for the chance to experience them. They called it aggressive adaptation protocols and accelerated human development programs. Vex had watched families arrive with young children, knowing that their offspring would be permanently changed by exposure to the planet's conditions. He had seen scientists and engineers volunteer for the most dangerous assignments, eager to see what modifications their bodies would develop. Most disturbing of all, he had observed military personnel studying the adapted humans with obvious interest in their enhanced capabilities. The final meeting with Captain Kane took place in the new administrative center that had been built in the heart of Haven Ridge. The building itself was a testament to human adaptation. It was constructed from materials that incorporated toxic compounds from the atmosphere, powered by systems that converted volcanic activity into energy, and designed to take advantage of conditions that would destroy conventional architecture. Kane entered the meeting room, and Vex saw immediately that she had changed again. Her skin now had a definite metallic quality that reflected the room's lights. Her eyes had adapted to see clearly in multiple spectrums of light. Her movements were more efficient, speaking of optimized muscle and bone structure. She was still recognizably the same person who had first greeted him, but she was also something entirely new. "Commander Vex," she said, extending her hand in. The human gesture of greeting. "I understand you'll be leaving us soon." Vex accepted the handshake, noting that her grip was stronger than before and her skin felt different against his armored palm. "Captain Kane, or should I say Director Kane, I understand you've received a promotion. The colonial government felt we needed someone with enhanced environmental adaptations to oversee the expansion programs." Kane replied with a smile that somehow managed to be both friendly and predatory. "Expansion programs? We're establishing new settlements in areas that were considered uninhabitable even by our previous standards. The deep ocean thermal vents, the volcanic mountain ranges, the polar toxic zones. Each environment will require different human adaptations, so we're planning specialized populations for each region." Kane gestured to a wall display showing the planet's surface divided into color-coded zones. Each area was marked with different environmental challenges and the types of human modifications that would be optimal for survival there. "We've received approval from Earth to establish this as a permanent adaptation research facility," Kane continued. "Scientists from across human space want to study the accelerated evolution we're experiencing here." "And the military applications?" Vex asked. Kane's smile widened. "What makes you think there are military applications?" I have observed your soldiers training in conditions that would challenge our best combat equipment. I have seen them developing capabilities that surpass anything in our databases. Humans have always been warriors, Commander. We're just getting better at it. Through the window, Vex could see a group of human soldiers conducting training exercises. In an area where toxic gas concentrations would kill most species instantly. They moved with a speed and coordination that spoke of enhanced reflexes and improved physical capabilities. Their equipment was minimal because their bodies had adapted to function efficiently in the hostile environment. You're not just surviving. Here, Vex said. You're using this place to create super soldiers. We're creating better humans, Kane corrected. Humans who can operate in any environment, handle any challenge, overcome any obstacle. She led him to another room where he could observe the colony's children at play. The youngest generation showed the most dramatic adaptations. They could breathe the toxic atmosphere without assistance. Their skin naturally filtered harmful radiation, and their enhanced physical capabilities allowed them to perform feats that would challenge adult members of most other species. These children represent the future of humanity, Kane said as they watched a group of 5-year-olds playing a game that involved climbing vertical rock faces in extreme heat. They'll grow up to colonize worlds that we can't even imagine surviving. What happens when they're adults? Vex asked. They'll have children of their own, each generation more adapted than the last. Eventually, humans will be able to live anywhere in the galaxy. No environment will be too hostile, no challenge too great. The implications hit Vex like a physical blow. The humans weren't just adapting to survive on death worlds. They were systematically transforming themselves into the ultimate death world species. Every harsh environment would become a training ground for creating more capable humans. Every challenge would be converted into an advantage. You're planning to colonize the entire galaxy, Vex realized. We're planning to make the entire galaxy habitable for humanity, Kane replied. Every toxic world, every radiation-blasted wasteland, every impossible environment will eventually become home to humans, specially adapted for those conditions. And other species? Kane's expression became thoughtful. There's room for everyone. Commander, the galaxy is vast. But humans will no longer be limited by environmental factors. We'll be able to establish colonies anywhere, extract resources from any world, explore any region of space. That evening, Vex transmitted his final report to the Cruthery High Command. The message was brief but would reshape galactic civilization. The human species has fundamentally redefined what it means to be a Deathworlder. They do not simply survive in hostile environments. They actively seek out the most dangerous conditions available and use them as tools for evolutionary advancement. Within a single generation, they have developed capabilities that surpass anything in our databases. The planet Kepler 442c has become a proving ground for accelerated human evolution. The inhabitants are no longer baseline humans, but represent something entirely new. They have demonstrated the ability to adapt to any environment, overcome any challenge, and transform every obstacle into an advantage. I recommend immediate reclassification of humanity as a Level 5 adaptive species and advise against any territorial disputes with human colonies. They are not competing with us for habitable worlds. They are making uninhabitable worlds habitable. The galaxy's understanding of survival must be updated. The Cruthery are built for survival in harsh environments. Humans are built for conquest of impossible environments through controlled evolution. As his ship departed Kepler 442c, Vex took one last look at the planet that had changed everything he thought he knew about life in the universe. The human cities were spreading across continents that should have been barren wastelands. New settlements were appearing in areas that had been considered completely uninhabitable. The humans had not just redefined what it meant to be a Deathworlder. They had redefined what it meant to be alive in a universe that constantly tried to kill everything in it. They had proven that with enough determination and adaptability, any environment could become home. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the back of his mind, Vex wondered if that was exactly what the humans had planned all along.